Charles, for this very interesting introduction. We are here in the very fortunate position that we have experts from Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and Poland to comment upon your input and bring their own views and position to the topic of after the crisis, migration and new challenges to sustainability in the Baltic Sea states. And we're hoping also that all of you that join us afterwards and watch this conversation on the internet afterwards, that you can bring your comments and visions as well to this series of expert seminars and expert exchanges that we are starting with this conference. I would like to ask the other panelists to join us up here. So we have first Kristina Kallas from the Institute for Baltic Studies in Estonia. Welcome, Kristina. We have Karolis Chibas from the Institute of Ethnic Studies in Lithuania, also a researcher and a political scientist. Dace Akula from the think tank Providos. Here you are, Dace, that's great. And Dr. Maciej Duchuk from the Institute of Social Policy in Poland. Excellent. So we have a good, yes, exactly. And when you take the floor, you need to speak into this one, and this one is for our viewers on the net afterwards. So Charles, maybe start and ask the panelists one of maybe the most difficult issue that you raised in your presentation, and that is of combining a response to the crisis that you're saying, and we're hoping you're right, will end, but with its enormous problems of outward emigration, of huge unemployment, not least among the young people, and arguing that the states, not in a very long-term perspective or quite soon, will have to take care of recruiting people, not only people from the Baltic states, but from other countries as well, to come and work in the countries. Can you tell me a little bit how you are dealing with this? How are you arguing when it comes to migration issues in your countries? How is the debate and the discussion? Would you like to start to speak into this one?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you my position, my view about migration. And let me start with my answer to your question to one sentence. Do you really think that we should speak about the influence of economic crisis on migration? Because we are in Poland different situations in Baltic states, because we survived very well the crisis, and we haven't observed any bad influence of economic crisis on the Polish economy. Employment rate in Poland in the end of 2011 is the highest level than since 1989. But we thought that probably in 2009, when we observed the situation in Great Britain and Ireland, that we should expect probably 200, 300, 400,000 people who decided to return to Poland, because we are the Green Island. We are the country which absolutely fantastic survived the economic crisis. But no one happened. This is new theory of migration. This is the theory of liquid migration, because the people decided not to come back to Poland. From the economic point of view, of course, we have the return migration, but the reasons of this return is different than economic. Because the people don't want to live, for example, in Great Britain, because the weather is not so good. Because the people decided to come back to Poland because they left their families in Poland. This is the reason, real reason. If we compare, for example, the economic situation in Poland and Great Britain. Of course, if you want to receive higher salary, you have to live. You should stay in Great Britain, not back to Poland. For the migration is absolutely complex phenomenon. That's why when the journalist my student asked me about this influence on the economic crisis on migration, I can answer, I don't know, really. It is much more different, another reason who are much more important for people who decided to emigrate to Great Britain, back to Poland, for example. This is some questions about. This is what is the situation in Poland now? If we speak about the emigration, but we don't have the debate on migration in Poland now, because for the politician this emigration is not interesting anymore, because we said everything what was possible about the emigration. We know everything about the immigration. It's not popular for politicians anymore. But this is we are starting now discussion about the immigration to Poland. Because if we compare Polish migration policy, it is one of the most liberal migration policy in the European Union. For example, we have in 2007 introduced the instrument. This is a declaration of employers who can employ in Poland citizens from the 5 different countries, like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Russia, and Belarus, in 2 weeks. This is not a problem. If I want to recruit someone from these 5 countries, it is only 2 weeks, and I have this guy in my workplace. For 6 months in the 12 months. This is typical seasonal migration. And this is the answer of the shortages on the labor market in Poland. But should we expect in the near few years that the people, for example, from Ukraine will decide to stay in Poland? Yes or no? My research, if I talk to Ukrainian workers in Poland, the answer is maybe for the next 2-3 years, but after that I would like to come back to Ukraine. It is the argument in Poland to not speak about integration. If you have these people only for 2-3 years, why we need the integration? And it is the mistake. Because we don't know is this declaration is true or not true. We don't have any problems with Ukrainians, of course, because they are very close to. For example, if you compare our cultural identity, this is the same. Christians, white, no problem. But if we speak about the typical immigration from China, from India, from Vietnam, from different countries, from different cultural backgrounds, it is the challenge for the integration. That's why we try to speak with the politicians to make real immigration policy in Poland, who is divided into 2 different chapters. The first chapter, this is the control and selective immigration policy. We have to know what kind of immigrants we need on the Polish labor market, where we have these shortages on the labor market. It is the one chapter, one part of this immigration policy. The second part is in the integration, because I can imagine flexible, effective immigration policy without integration policy. This is the mistakes the countries like Great Britain, like France, like Germany, like Holland, that's another one. This is the problem, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the problem of Sweden. If you have the support for this anti-immigration party in Sweden on the so big level, it is the problem of integration policy. You have failed the integration policy in Sweden as well. That's why, if you want to learn from your mistakes, because we talked yesterday about the best practices or of mistakes, and I'm sure that we should speak about the mistakes, because we don't have in integration policy best practices in the world. That's why we can have only our best practices probably after learning from your mistakes. It is the very complex. Yes, last sentence. I know this. I'm academic. This is 1.5 hour presentation, and this is I think this is the problem. And the last sentence is mine. That we are too divided in the European Union to have the common European migration policy. We have to. This is possible to have the common asylum policy, visa policy, but not typical immigration policy, because we are too divided. And of course, last sentence, please. Okay. And you are the better situation than Baltic states and Poland, because you can recruit us to Sweden, to Great Britain, to Holland. But we don't have this opportunity to recruit Europe to us. That's why we have to recruit people from Ukraine, from China, from India, which is much more difficult for us, from integration point of view, that you integrate Poles, Lithuanians, Latvians, or Estonians. It is probably one of the next issues to discuss. Sorry, I spoke too long. Sorry for that. Thank you.
No problem. Dacia, please give your perspectives. How are you dealing with this debate, the needs of the short term and the long term needs of migration?
Okay, I have 5 points and I'll try to be quick. Well, I think our societies are coming to terms with the fact that they need to appreciate immigration in the sense, the role that it's had. It's not only bad, of course, there's a lot of painful, families breaking up or families not being there anymore, etc., etc. I'm not going to elaborate on that. But people who are in other countries, they acquire skills, resources, talent, etc., that they, if they at some point come back home, they will be able to invest at home. So this is why it's so important to try to keep the link, the ties with this population abroad, and also try to help those who are already now considering moving back with practical measures that can help them integrate or adopt back after several years of being away, not knowing the institutions, not knowing the changes in legislation, etc., etc. So that's exactly why the Latvian government, under the initiative of the Minister of Economy, has been working on this return migration plan, which I have been asked to chair, and we're going to deliver next week already, and hopefully that will bring some concrete measures to help these people. So that's point one. Because according to the estimates of the Minister of Economy, of the Ministry of Economy, if our size of the economy grows and the population is aging, as we've seen from the lovely graphs that we've seen in the presentation, we will have by 2030 200,000 vacancies as a result of the size of the economy growing and part of the population just dying. And then the question is really who's going to fill these vacancies and who's going to be not just doing the job, but who's going to live there. And then that's the question is, if part of these vacancies will be filled by return migration of Latvians who've been away and acquired skills and talents and resources, if they will be still willing to come back, or do we look at other people from outside the world? And I have to stress that immigration into our countries is going on despite the fact that the crisis was there. There are several specific sectors where labor shortages, because of the mismatch between education systems and the labor market needs, there are these labor shortages as we speak. So there are people who are recruited in Latvia to do shipbuilding, to do IT work, etc., etc. So it's not like we're saying, okay, we're talking about this immigration as a possibility in the future. It's already happening. And my final point then is, leading back to what our Polish colleague already said, our countries, our communities at this point are not ready for more diversity, why more migration into these societies at the moment is not sustainable. All our questions about identity, citizenship, we've had this discussion yesterday, a very interesting one. The experience, bad or good practices, whatever you name them, with the integration of the Russian-speaking population is just leading us to the fact that unless we're ready to take the lessons and act differently, we're not going to be able to be more open-minded towards anyone else, any other newcomers to our communities.
Thank you very much for this very short and spicy comment. Karolis, please, from Lithuania, how are you dealing with this debate?
Lithuania is more or less in the same situation as Latvia, but what I would like to stress three additional points. So, what options do we have in Lithuania at this stage of migration processes? Yeah, as in Latvia, whether we have to trigger return migration, and in the parallel, whether we have attract labor force from third countries. So we have two options. So, while looking at the political priorities, in 2007, Lithuanian Parliament adopted first migration and regulation strategy, which actually, after the crisis, is without any action plan, so it's only a piece of paper. So we don't have any political priorities in terms of attracting labor force from foreign countries, and we do not have any political priorities in terms of like triggering the processes related to return migration. And this is a challenge to address in the near future. The next argument which comes to my mind is, well, the last week I was in Lisbon in migrant integration expert seminar, and I heard the report on migration and homelessness in the EU. And this really interesting data, as if you look at the Ireland and UK, so the biggest share of homeless migrants are from Poland and from Lithuania. So people are going for better lives to the western part of the EU, and some of them, they end up as homeless people. So, well, I guess that also we should look at the integration challenges within the EU mobility, not only the integration of third country nationals in the EU in the context of outside migration. So this is the second point. And also, what I would like to stress, well, Charles mentioned the extent of migration from Lithuania. So according to population censuses which were accomplished in 2001 and 2011, population decreased from 3.5 to less than 3 million. So according to NGOs data, we have less than 3 million inhabitants in Lithuania. So we lost more than 400,000 people, and according to NGOs data that I have, 63% of immigrants under the age of 34. So this is the question: what should we do in the future? Whether we have to trigger like return migration or attract people from third countries? But I don't think that we will manage to trigger return migration, as it is not labor migration anymore. As you said, it's family migration. And family migration, it has a huge potential of permanent resident in country of destination. So this is the first argument. And the last argument is that, yes, in a parallel to these macroeconomical aspects of migration from Lithuania to UK, to Ireland, to Nordic countries, well, from 1991 and to 2012, so we have migration system. Well, it's planned migration. And together with macroeconomical factors, we have migration network with different sets of institutions. Migrant social ties, informal infrastructure of migrants in the countries of destination, which trigger migration processes, and it gives to migration with its social aspect. So, well, by concluding, well, I would just like to say that, yeah, the whole context is economical one. But if you look at the very last decision upon migration, it also has very important aspect of migration network. And if tomorrow or the day after tomorrow we wake up, as I said, in a John Lennon's world, the migration will continue because of the migration network.
Thank you very much for the last comment. Please, Christina.
I would like to thank Professor Charles Woolfson for the presentation and for the harsh presentation for probably the Baltic states and Poland. And of course it's a very pessimistic picture that came from this. And I think there is no politician in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland who wouldn't know that. I mean, they all know the numbers, and they have seen them, and they have discussed probably in secretly among themselves these numbers, and it's no surprise to anybody. The only thing I think why maybe they are not so pessimistic is that it's the perspective. The perspective from Sweden looking at these numbers seems to be horrible. If you are an Estonian politician who have survived 1990s or late 1980s, you think, oh my God, that's good compared to where we were. So actually it's not bad. And that's the excuse they keep telling themselves. They're saying it can be worse. So why worry? It was worse, it can be worse, so we are fine. And that's what they're saying. But in terms of what are their responses, apart from being too pessimistic maybe, compared to the numbers that they are facing, is that their response is problematic because they don't immigration or immigration policy. Estonia doesn't have an immigration policy. And I can predict that it will not have it for the next 20 years. There will be no immigration. This is very clear. And I think for every Estonian and for every politician, because There is one problem for most of the European countries as well in terms of immigration, is that why the immigration fails or why there is a very bad immigration policy is a framework in which this is discussed. And it's usually the framework of the nation state. And Estonia is still dreaming of building a state that was there in 19th century. And in this concept, the immigration doesn't fit in, because the only way of dealing with the numbers that you saw today is not immigration, because that doesn't help to build a nation state. So what we do, we try to boost the birth rate. Women, please start having babies. Estonian babies, please. That's one message that politicians tell us every single day. Women, please start having babies. We can give you money, please start having babies. And the second one they tell us is, oh, we have to get the Estonians from the rest of the world back. So let's try to get them home. Let's pay them money as well, maybe they will come home. Like, phone company trying to get clients. I give you a credit in Poland. Let's give you a special credit, come back to Poland. And this is the policy options they are offering us for those numbers. Women start having babies, Estonians come home. There is no other. There is no other options for dealing with these numbers. And I don't see actually this debate of immigration even possible as long as this understanding of the state as being very clearly a nation state. So there is no way we can discuss the immigration. I don't think Estonian society and politicians are even ready to start this, because they feel that this is a Pandora box. Once they open it, there's going to be a fight and arguments about this and where we are going and what are we going to be in next 20 years. And I think in Estonian case, why discussing or new migration, let's call it new migration, why is it difficult, is because as soon as you initiate this debate, they say, listen, but we had an immigration in 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, we didn't control it, we didn't ask for it, we didn't want it. And now we are dealing with the consequences of trying to integrate 30% of people who don't want to be here and who happen to be here not by their will and by accident. Neither we wanted them here, so we are dealing with this, so don't start even talking about bringing anybody new until we have managed to deal with this problem. So the response, in my expertise or in my knowledge, is the response to these numbers that we saw is not adequate, but I don't see how we can actually proceed with this, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bringing on so many topics. Charles, do you want to comment shortly before Dacia wanted to?
Just say one thing. I thought I was being pessimistic. The Estonian colleague here has capped that. So, I think that this discussion is important because of its many-sided nature. And we are recognizing important differences between various countries that are here. But I think that we have a hugely challenging agenda emerging. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
That's it for a short comment then.
I just wanted to add one thing that we also see among the population and also those who have emigrated, this huge anger towards the state as such for the fact of emigration, for the fact of having lost friends, family to another country and spending part of the weekends Skyping with them, and that's the only way to keep in touch on a regular basis. And also for those who emigrated, there's this huge anger also about the lack of policies or the lack of cooperation with this community that has been growing over the years. And also I'd say this anger is very difficult to work with and try to engage in a conversation with, because this argument is, I'm angry at this state, but what's the state? The state is what makes it, the people who make it. And I think this also goes back to what Charles showed in the presentation, this kind of let's say, a heritage from the Soviet-style planned economy, where you have these high expectations of how can we fix the state to be able to go back to it? How can we make the state in such a condition that there is no more emigration and that people who went away are able to come back? And with this discussion on return migration plan, is this whole question on, okay, increase the minimum salary level, create new jobs, but it's not the state who can do it, And also the last point, I think that this emigration is also a kind of nice learning lesson on how system of welfare can be established, how can it work in other countries, but it also leads to this very human and understandable impatience that this system is not in place in Latvia, in Estonia, in Lithuania, and there's this, it fuels this anger even more that we haven't been able to establish these systems of welfare. We haven't been able to, at this point, establish stability for the person, for the families, so that they can see the prospects that are economic, social, just giving the stability feeling. And it's really difficult to engage in this conversation, to go back to, okay, this is just us who are able to create a system, whether you live there or not. It's even the remittances and other things. People who are living abroad as immigrants, they are contributing to this society's development. So it's going on. It's just this human impatience that we haven't been able to do it 22 years since we regained independence. When you see that in Sweden many, many decades have been spent with really wealthy resources to establish that, And I keep reminding people, look, we've been in a different development phase, and this is where we are right now. That's why, you have to understand this anger and this impatience to be able to move forward.
We raised so many issues here, and I'm really glad that this is just the start of a series of seminars, and that we are going to be in touch and produce a report and gather again at the final conference. Let me just raise one more question, because I think it's relevant for what many of you said, because you're saying, speaking about the figures of emigration for Lithuania, we have a higher share of families actually leaving, people leaving, as you said, you might have to expect them to leave kind of for good, because they're taking their kids out of school, they're raising them in a different country, they're learning another language. Everything we know from migration is guest worker systems do not work, because people are not guests. They tend to stay, even though when you interview them the first few years, they say, I'm going back. And then as time goes on, they stay, and it's even more so when they bring their families. Do your countries have any policies, and what do you think of policies of keeping in touch with those people that you think will maybe not return? I'm speaking here of remittances, because of course the money that they send home is a very important contribution to the societies, and these remittances might continue to come even though people are not planning to return, even though we know that if people are planning to return, they tend to send more money, and particularly they tend to send money to family members. So if the family is already left, the people who would receive the remittances are just grandmother and grandfathers and more distant relatives. So do you have the fancy name is diaspora policy? Do you have policies for those Poles, for instance, in the UK, who you realize now they did not come back, 500,000 of them. They tend to stay, even though many of them are homeless, but they tend to cling on to the new host states. We make the same round. I need to ask you to be very short, all of you, just a short comment.
Yeah. Very briefly. So the Polish government, of course, has this is something like we can say diaspora policy. But only two issues. The first issue is the Polish government is going to connect to diasporas in the United Kingdom. This is first diasporas, the Poles who decided to not come back to Poland after the Second World War. This is the old diasporas. It is the new diasporas after 2004. And it is many of differences between these two diasporas, and the Polish government is going how to connect these two diasporas, because this is if you have, for example, 500,000 people abroad, it is these 500,000 people can build the positive picture of your country. Of course, it is very important to use these people for building this positive picture, but it is quite impossible if these people try to fight each other. Yeah, that's why this is one of the issue. How to connect this interest of late diaspora and the new diaspora. And the second, the Polish government has a special program for non-governmental organization in United Kingdom, Ireland, Norway, and different countries. How to support the building of Polish organization abroad. Because this is very important. It is, of course, for us, it is very important to support, for example, the organization which are very close to church, because every Poles, 90% of Poles, decide to go on Sundays to church. It is the one of the solutions how to build this organization very close to church, but not only this. This is try to how to support this establishing this organization of men. This is at most the youth polls decided to make this organization and try to support, to give them the money from Poland to build this Polonismus, I can say, abroad. Yeah.
From Latvia?
Okay, so as we've seen in the surveys, this is exactly the question, because most people don't plan to come back in the next 3 to 5 years and even more. So the question really is about how do we keep in touch, how do we help people to sustain their identity, Latvian language, etc. So this is something that the government has been starting to plan much more intense since last year, because we would say in the crisis they've been busy with other things, trying to fix the state. So things like trying to support the weekend schools to teach Latvian to children, to have certain theaters, etc., performances that go to the emigration, let's say, spots where the diaspora are. Also, with this return migration plan, there's much more emphasis on the business ties that should be also, strengthened with this community that is really, wealthy community that could contribute. And also the last point with allowing more easy way of participation in policy making and the contribution in policy making in the country via not only referenda. We've seen one this year, and the immigrants turn out very, very high numbers to support or not support the Russian as a second state language in February this year.
Absentee voting, that they can vote from abroad?
They voted, yes, they took part in the referendum by being abroad, and also things like online consultations on the most important topics. If they're able to contribute just by being where they are, this is how the country, the government is looking at it currently.